The great chamber was filled with panic. 12 different alien races sat around a massive circular table, and every single one of them looked terrified. Their voices mixed together in a chaos of sounds, clicks, whistles, deep rumbles, and electronic beeps. The universal translators worked hard to make sense of it all. Admiral Kwan sat quietly in his chair. The human section of the Galactic Council was small compared to the others. Just 3 chairs in a corner while some alien races had dozens of representatives. Kwan watched the chaos with calm eyes. His weathered face showed no emotion as the aliens argued and shouted. The Zeltani ambassador stood up. Its body was made of living crystal that changed colors when it was upset. Right now it flashed bright red and orange, the colors of fear and anger. When it spoke, its voice sounded like wind chimes in a storm. "We must act now," the Zeltani said. "The Vorthon Empire has destroyed 3 entire star systems. Billions of lives turned into raw materials for their machines. If we don't stop them soon, they will consume everything." The holographic display in the center of the chamber showed the horrible truth. Entire planets had been broken apart like eggs. The pieces floated in space as dead rocks while massive Vorthon ships sucked up the debris. What used to be worlds full of life were now just materials for building more war machines. A Threx representative clicked its mandibles nervously. The insect-like alien's wings buzzed with anxiety. "My people have run calculations," it said in a voice like grinding metal. "The Vorthon fleet grows by 30% every month. They learn from every battle. They adapt to every weapon we use against them." Admiral Kwan had seen the reports. The Vorthons were not just machines. They were a collective mind that shared knowledge instantly across their entire fleet. Every ship that survived a battle made all their ships stronger. Every weapon used against them became useless after the first encounter. The Krellian ambassador raised one of its thick tentacles. The large purple alien looked like a cross between an octopus and a tank. Its voice was deep and slow, like an earthquake speaking. "The Krellian Empire will contribute 2,000 dreadnoughts," it announced. "Our heaviest ships with our strongest weapons." The chamber filled with approving sounds. The Krellian dreadnoughts were legendary. Each one was over a mile long and could destroy a moon with a single shot. "The Threx Collective offers 1,500 swarm fighters," clicked the insect ambassador. "Fast ships that can overwhelm their defenses with sheer numbers." More approval. The Threx fighters were small but deadly, able to move like angry wasps around larger ships. The Aquatic Federation representative gurgled through its water-filled helmet. "Our deep space carriers will join the fight. We have 500 ships ready to launch." One by one, each alien race made their pledge. The gaseous entities promised their energy-based ships. The Silicon Lords offered their mountain-sized fortresses. The Hive Queens would send their bioships that could heal themselves in battle. Soon, over 10,000 ships had been promised. The largest fleet in galactic history was forming. The aliens began to look more hopeful. Surely such a massive force could stop the Vorthon threat. Then all eyes turned to the human section. Admiral Kwan felt the weight of their stares. He had been expecting this moment. The other races saw humans as the newcomers, barely 50 years, in the Galactic Council. Earth had only recently learned about faster-than-light travel. In the eyes of civilizations that were millions of years old, humans were like children. The council chairman, an ancient being made of pure energy, spoke, in a voice like distant thunder. "Admiral Kwan, what does humanity offer to this great alliance?" The chamber grew quiet. Even the constant humming of life support systems seemed to stop. The aliens leaned forward in their seats. Some looked curious, others looked expectant. A few already seemed disappointed, as if they expected humans to offer very little. Kwan stood up slowly. His uniform was simple compared to the ornate clothing of the alien ambassadors. No jewels, no flowing robes, no energy patterns dancing across his body. Just plain blue fabric with silver insignia. "The United Earth Navy," he said in a clear voice, "will contribute 1 ship." Silence. Complete and total silence. Then someone started laughing. It was a high-pitched giggle that came from the melodic communion's representative, a creature that looked like a singing plant. Other aliens began to make their own sounds of amusement, clicks, gurgles, and electronic static that the translators turned into laughter. The Krellian ambassador's tentacles wiggled in confusion. "Admiral," it rumbled, "perhaps your translator made an error. Did you mean 1,000 ships?" "No," Quan replied simply. "One ship. The UEN Indomitable." The laughter stopped. Now the aliens looked confused and then angry. The crystal Zilthani flashed angry red colors. "This is not a joke," it chimed. "We face extinction and you offer one ship?" A small alien that looked like a walking mushroom stood up on its chair. "The Spore Collective has lived for 10 million years. We offer 800 of our finest biocruisers, and the humans, who learned about space travel yesterday, offer one ship?" The chamber erupted in angry voices. Some aliens stood up and waved their arms, tentacles, or energy fields. Others made sounds that the translators couldn't even convert into words, probably curse words in languages too alien for human understanding. "This is an insult," shouted the representative from the Metal Brotherhood, its robot voice crackling with static. "Either humanity is too weak to help, or they are cowards." "Maybe they're working with the Vorthons," suggested a voice from the back. This caused even more chaos as some aliens began to seriously consider this possibility. Through all the shouting and accusations, Admiral Quan remained calm. He had expected this reaction. He had warned Earth Command that the other races would not understand. How could they? They had never met humans in a real war. Captain Yuna, Quan's aide, leaned close to him. She was a young woman with short black hair and sharp eyes. Like all human military officers, she looked calm even in chaos. "Sir, should we explain?" "No," Quan said quietly. "They wouldn't believe us if we told them. They need to see for themselves." The council chairman raised a hand-like energy appendage for silence. "Admiral Quan," it said in a voice that echoed through the chamber, "surely you understand the gravity of this situation. The Vorthan Empire represents an extinction-level threat to all organic life. How can one human ship make any difference?" Quan looked around the chamber at all the angry and confused faces, beings from a dozen different worlds with technologies that humanity could barely understand, all staring at him like he was crazy. "You asked what humanity can contribute," he said. "I told you one ship. An alien that looked like a floating jellyfish pulsed with bioluminescent anger. Then humanity is useless to this alliance. We should remove you from the council." "The Vorthons will reach human space in 6 months," added the Threx representative. "When they turn Earth into raw materials, don't expect our help. You had your chance to join us." Some aliens began to leave their seats. The representatives from 3 different species walked out of the chamber entirely, their various sounds of disgust echoing off the walls. Others turned their backs to the human section, showing their contempt in the universal language of body movement. Admiral Quan watched them go without expression. When the chamber finally began to quiet down, he turned to Captain Yuna. "Signal, Earth Command," he said in a voice just loud enough for nearby aliens to hear. "Tell them the council took our offer about as well as expected." Yuna nodded and spoke into her communication device. Several alien representatives who were still in their seats exchanged glances. They looked puzzled by Quan's calm reaction to their anger. "And the Indomitable?" Yuna asked. Quan looked at the holographic display showing the approaching Vorthon fleet. Thousands of dark ships moving like a plague across the galaxy, turning everything they touched into more weapons of war. "She launches in 72 hours, he said. "Let's hope we're not too late." As the human delegation gathered their simple belongings and prepared to leave, the remaining aliens watched them with mixtures of anger, confusion, and something else, a tiny seed of doubt. There was something about the way the humans carried themselves, something about their complete lack of fear or embarrassment, that didn't make sense. The humans walked out of the chamber like they had just won the argument instead of being humiliated by it. Admiral Quan never looked back, never tried to explain, never begged for understanding. Behind them, the aliens continued planning their great fleet of 10,000 ships, telling themselves that they didn't need humanity's help anyway. But some of them kept thinking about the strange confidence in Admiral Kwan's voice when he said just one word: indomitable. 6 months had passed since the meeting at the Galactic Council. The Kepler Junction buzzed with activity as the largest fleet in galactic history gathered for war. Ships of every shape and size filled space as far as the eye could see. The Krellian dreadnoughts looked like floating cities. Each one was over a mile long with armor thicker than most planetary crusts. Their massive weapon arrays could crack moons in half. The crews inside numbered in the thousands, all dedicated to operating these monsters of war. The Threk swarm fighters moved in clouds around the larger ships. They were small and fast, like angry metal wasps. Each one was barely big enough for a single pilot, but there were so many of them that they darkened space itself. 1,500 ships that could move as one mind, striking and retreating before the enemy could react. The Zelthani light cruisers were works of art. Made from living crystal, they caught and reflected the light of nearby stars in beautiful patterns, but their beauty hid deadly weapons that could slice through any known armor with beams of pure energy. The Aquatic Federation carriers floated like whales in the void. Their hulls were smooth and curved, designed to move through both space and water. Each carrier held hundreds of smaller craft, ready to launch swarms of fighters when the battle began. In the middle of all these impressive ships sat one small vessel that looked almost embarrassed to be there. The UN Indomitable was less than half the size of the smallest Krellian ship. Its hull was plain gray metal with no decorations or fancy designs. It looked like what it was supposed to be, a simple human heavy cruiser. Captain Jinho stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, watching the alien fleet through the main view screen. He was a quiet man in his 40s with calm eyes and steady hands. His crew respected him because he never panicked and never gave orders he wasn't sure about. "Captain," said his communications officer, Lieutenant Sujin, "the Krellian flagship is requesting permission to send an inspection team aboard." Jinho nodded. "Grant permission. Standard tour only." This had been happening for weeks. Every major ship in the fleet wanted to see what humanity had brought to the fight. The alien commanders couldn't believe that one small ship was Earth's entire contribution to the war effort. An hour later, Admiral Thorok of the Krellian Empire stood in the Indomitable's main corridor. The large purple alien had to duck his head to fit through the human-sized passages. His tentacles waved in what his species considered polite curiosity. "Your ship seems adequate," Thorok said diplomatically. "The plasma cannons appear to be standard design. Your shields are within normal parameters." Captain Jinho walked beside the alien admiral, showing him through the ship's public areas. The weapon systems were indeed standard. Nothing that would impress a being whose own ships carried planet-killing superweapons. "How many crew members?" Thorok asked. 300, Jinho replied. Thorok's tentacles drooped slightly. His own flagship carried 12,000 crew members. "And you believe this vessel can contribute meaningfully to our campaign?" "We'll do our part," Jinho said simply. They toured the engine room where Chief Engineer Minho explained the fusion reactors. They were clean, efficient, but nothing special compared to the exotic power sources used by older galactic civilizations. Thorok examined the weapon systems and found them disappointingly ordinary. What Thorok didn't see were the sealed sections throughout the ship. Corridors that were marked as storage areas but had no doors. Engine compartments that showed up on blueprints but couldn't be accessed. Power conduits that led to empty spaces on the official diagrams. He also didn't notice how the human crew moved. They walked through their ship like they were in a sacred place. Sometimes they would pause for no reason, as if listening to something only they could hear. When they thought no one was watching, some crew members would place their hands on certain wall panels and close their eyes for a few seconds. "Your crew seems very focused," Thorok observed as they returned to the bridge. "We take our duty seriously," Captain Jinho replied. After the Krellian admiral left, similar tours were given to representatives from 6 other major species. They all came away with the same impression. The human ship was adequate, but unremarkable. Some felt sorry for humanity, thinking they had sent their best ship knowing it would probably be destroyed. Others were annoyed that such a small vessel would take up space in their battle formations. None of them suspected the truth. 3 weeks later, the Vorthon advance fleet was detected at the edge of the system. Long-range sensors showed 300 ships of various sizes, all with the distinctive dark metal hulls that made them look like weapons themselves. They moved in perfect formation, their machine minds calculating the best approach to destroy the waiting organic fleet. The Allied commanders held their final strategy meeting aboard the Zelthani flagship. The crystalline conference room sparkled, with light as holographic displays showed the battle plan. It was a simple strategy. Use their overwhelming numbers to surround and destroy the Vorthon fleet. Admiral Quan attended the meeting via hologram from the Indomitable. While the alien commanders gestured and argued about formations and tactics, he sat quietly and listened. "The human ship will remain in the rear guard," announced Admiral Thorok. "No offense intended, but your vessel lacks the firepower for frontline combat." "Understood," Quan replied without emotion. The battle began 2 days later. The Allied fleet moved forward in a massive wall of ships that stretched across space. It was an impressive sight. 10,000 vessels from a dozen different civilizations, all united against a common threat. The Vorthon fleet came to meet them. Their ships were dark and angular, designed purely for destruction. No decorations, no unnecessary features, just weapons and engines arranged in the most efficient possible way. The first exchange of fire lit up space like a fireworks display. Plasma beams, particle cannons, and exotic energy weapons created a light show that could be seen from other star systems. The Allied fleet's initial volley should have destroyed half the Vorthon force. Instead, the enemy ships absorbed the damage and adapted. "Impossible," shouted the Threx commander over the communications channel. "Their hulls are changing composition. Our weapons are becoming less effective." That was the horror of fighting the Vorthons. They were not just machines, they were a collective intelligence that learned from every attack. Within minutes of being hit by plasma weapons, their hulls had adapted to resist plasma. Energy beams that worked perfectly in the first minute became useless by the 10th minute. The Vorthon return fire was devastatingly accurate. Their weapons found weak spots in alien defenses that the ship's own designers hadn't known existed. Krelian dreadnoughts, thought to be unsinkable, exploded as Vorthon energy beams found critical system junctions. "They're adapting too quickly," reported the Aquatic Federation admiral. "Every tactic we use becomes obsolete within minutes." The battle turned into a slaughter. The Vorthons learned and adapted faster than the organic minds could develop new strategies. Ships that had survived thousands of battles were destroyed by enemies that became smarter with every passing second. Admiral Thorok watched his flagship's bridge explode around him as a Vorthon beam found his main reactor. His last transmission was filled with static. "All ships retreat now." But there was nowhere to run. The Vorthons had surrounded the Allied fleet using the same tactics they had just learned from watching the organic ship's movements. The bridge of the Indomitable, Captain Jinho watched the massacre through the viewscreen. His ship hung back from the main battle, apparently too weak to contribute to the fight. Around them, the greatest fleet in galactic history was being systematically destroyed by an enemy that learned faster than they could adapt. "Sir," reported Lieutenant Sujin, her voice steady despite the carnage they were witnessing. "Allied losses are at 60% and climbing." Lieutenant Minho looked up from his station. "The Krelian flagship is gone. Most of the Zelthani battle group has been destroyed." The Vorthon fleet continued its methodical advance. Their collective mind had analyzed every weapon, every tactic, every formation the Allies had used. The organic fleets were no longer a threat. They were just raw materials waiting to be processed. Captain Jinho turned to look at Admiral Quan, who had been watching the battle in complete silence. "Admiral," Jinho said quietly, "the crew is ready." Quan stood up from his chair. For the first time since the battle began, he showed emotion. His face was grim but determined. "Very well. Authorization code, Terra Invictus 77 Alpha." He paused and looked around the bridge at his crew. These men and women had trained their entire lives for this moment. They knew what was about to happen, and they had accepted the price they would have to pay. "Release the locks," Admiral Kwan commanded. Throughout the ship, massive blast doors began to slide open with sounds like thunder. Sealed compartments that hadn't seen light for months suddenly filled with activity. Power systems that had been dormant came online with humming that seemed to shake the ship's bones. The crew stood at attention, but something strange was happening to them. Their eyes began to glow with a soft blue light. They moved with perfect coordination, as if controlled by a single mind. The Indomitable's power signature suddenly changed. The UN Indomitable began to change. The hull plates that had looked like ordinary gray metal started to glow with inner light. Sections of the ship that appeared solid became transparent, revealing massive chambers filled with strange blue energy. The vessel that the aliens had dismissed as a simple heavy cruiser was revealing its true nature. Captain Jinho felt the transformation begin in his own mind. The neural interface that had been installed in his brain 5 years ago finally activated. Suddenly, he wasn't just Jinho anymore. He was connected to something vast and ancient and utterly human. "Hello, Captain," said a voice in his head. It was warm and familiar, like talking to an old friend. "I am Fleet Admiral Victoria Hayes. I've been waiting a long time to fight again." All around the bridge, similar conversations were happening. Lieutenant Sujin gasped as her mind touched the consciousness of Admiral Sarah Chen, the hero of the Europa defense. Lieutenant Minho felt the presence of General Rosa Martinez, whose tactical genius had saved Mars during the colony wars. These weren't artificial intelligences. They were real human minds uploaded and preserved after death. The greatest military leaders in human history, converted into digital consciousness and stored in the ship's quantum computers. They had been waiting, dreaming electric dreams, for the chance to serve humanity one more time. "All stations report ready," announced Lieutenant Sujin, but her voice carried strange harmonics now. She wasn't just speaking to the bridge crew. She was speaking to the uploaded consciousness of Admiral Chen, whose strategic knowledge flowed through her mind like water. The Vorthon fleet sensed the change in the human ship. Their collective, machine intelligence analyzed the new power readings and found them impossible according to known physics. But the Vorthons were pragmatic. If something existed, it could be destroyed. They began to turn their attention toward the small human vessel. Admiral Kwan stood in the center of the bridge, his eyes now glowing with blue light. But unlike his crew, he carried multiple consciousnesses. The weight of humanity's greatest military minds pressed against his thoughts. Fleet Admiral Hayes was there, but so were dozens of others, generals and admirals who had chosen to become part of the ship rather than face retirement or death. "Vorthon fleet is changing course toward us," reported Ensign Minho from the tactical station, but his voice carried the authority of General Alexander Petrov, whose uploaded mind guided their weapon systems. The enemy ships moved with mechanical precision. 300 vessels arranged themselves in a perfect attack formation, their dark hulls bristling with weapons that had just finished learning how to destroy the Allied fleet. Their collective intelligence calculated that this single human ship would be eliminated in approximately 4 minutes. They had never encountered anything like what humanity had built. The Indomitable opened fire, and the weapons that emerged were not the simple plasma cannons the aliens had seen during their tours. Hidden weapon ports opened all along the hull, revealing armaments that seemed to bend the laws of physics. Temporal displacement cannons fired beams of twisted time. Where they struck, Vorthon ships became trapped in localized time loops, their hulls aging centuries and seconds while their weapons fired at empty space that had been there moments before. Quantum tunnel bombs appeared inside enemy vessels, materializing directly within their hulls through folded space. No shields could stop them. No armor could deflect them. They simply appeared and exploded, tearing the Vorthon ships apart from within. Gravity well generators created artificial black holes that crushed enemy vessels into points of super-dense matter. The Vorthon's adaptive technology was useless against weapons that attacked the fundamental forces of the universe itself. But the most terrifying weapon was the one that couldn't be seen or measured. The uploaded human consciousnesses reached out through space itself, their minds touching the Vorthan collective intelligence directly. The machine minds had never experienced anything like human thought. Their logic was based on efficiency, calculation, and adaptation. They could learn from any weapon, counter any tactic, adapt to any technology, but they had never tried to understand something as chaotic and unpredictable as human creativity. Admiral Hayes's consciousness slammed into the Vorthan network like a hurricane. Her tactical experience, gathered over 40 years of warfare, flooded their systems with battle plans that made no logical sense but worked anyway. Plans that sacrificed efficiency for surprise, that chose victory over survival, that embraced chaos as a weapon. General Martinez attacked their engineering protocols, showing them human solutions that violated their understanding of proper design. Human ships built with backup systems for their backup systems, powered by reactors that should have been impossible, armed with weapons that were too dangerous for any sane species to use. Admiral Chen assaulted their strategic planning with the one concept that machine intelligence could never truly understand: the human refusal to accept defeat. She showed them battles where humans had won against impossible odds, not through superior technology or numbers, but through sheer stubborn determination to keep fighting, even when logic said they should surrender. The effect on the Vorthan fleet was immediate and terrifying. Ships that had moved with perfect coordination began to hesitate. Their collective intelligence, faced with the pure chaos of human military thought, started to fracture. Some Vorthan vessels began firing on their own fleet, their targeting systems confused by tactical doctrines that prioritized morale over efficiency. Others simply stopped functioning as their machine minds retreated from contact with thoughts that refused to follow logical patterns. Captain Jinho, his consciousness now merged with Fleet Admiral Hayes, spoke with a voice that carried the weight of centuries. This is why Earth sent one ship, because one ship carrying the accumulated knowledge and determination of humanity's finest warriors is worth more than any conventional fleet. The largest Vorthan vessel, a moon-sized command ship that served as the collective intelligence's primary node, tried to analyze what was happening to its fleet. The machine mind ran millions of calculations per second, trying to understand how organic thoughts could disrupt its perfectly logical systems. It discovered something that filled its circuits with what could only be called terror. The human consciousnesses weren't just fighting, they were teaching. Every interaction with the Vorthan network left behind traces of human military doctrine, human tactical thinking, human refusal to accept the impossible. The collective intelligence began to experience something it had never felt before: doubt. For the first time in its existence, it questioned whether its goals were achievable. The humans had shown it battles where the logical choice was surrender, but human commanders had chosen to fight anyway and somehow won. Enemy command vessel is attempting to sever its neural links, reported Lieutenant Sujin, her voice harmonizing with Admiral Chen's uploaded consciousness. They're trying to protect their core intelligence from contamination. Contamination? Captain Jinho asked, though the answer was already flowing through his merged consciousness. Human irrationality, sir. Human stubbornness. Human refusal to accept defeat even when death is certain. The Vorthan collective mind is having trouble processing concepts like, I will die before I surrender, because machines don't understand dying for principles that can't be calculated. The surviving alien commanders watched in stunned silence as the human ship continued its impossible assault. They had seen the Vorthans adapt to every weapon, counter every strategy, learn from every mistake. Nothing had been able to stop the machine fleet's advance. But now the Vorthans were the ones being overwhelmed. Their ships twisted and turned in space like wounded animals, their perfect formations breaking apart as the collective intelligence struggled to understand what was happening to it. Commander Zelik of the Zelthani Lightbringer watched through quantum sensors as human consciousness directly attacked machine logic. By the eternal crystal, they whispered to their bridge crew, the humans aren't just fighting the machines. They're driving them insane. The Vorthan command ship's hull began to buckle as something attacked it from within. The uploaded human minds had infiltrated the machine collective's network and were systematically dismantling it from the inside, one logical pathway at a time. Fleet Admiral Hayes' consciousness found the core of the Vorthon intelligence, a vast quantum computer that had been calculating optimal strategies for thousands of years. She touched it with a single human thought. Sometimes you have to do something stupid to win. The machine mind tried to process this concept and failed. How could stupidity lead to victory? How could illogical choices be optimal? The contradiction created a cascade failure that spread through the entire Vorthon network. Ships began to power down as their controlling intelligence retreated deeper into itself, trying to escape the chaos of human thought. Others spun out of control as their navigation systems became confused by tactical doctrines that valued courage over calculation. The battle that had begun with the systematic destruction of the Allied fleet was ending with the complete breakdown of the Vorthon collective consciousness. The silence after the battle was more terrifying than the battle itself. 300 Vorthon ships drifted in space like the corpses of metal whales. Their hulls no longer pulsed with malevolent intelligence. Their weapons had powered down. The collective consciousness that had driven them to consume entire star systems was gone, fled into whatever digital nightmare passed for machine unconsciousness. The surviving ships of the Allied fleet kept their distance from the Indomitable. What they had witnessed defied everything they understood about warfare, technology, and the nature of consciousness itself. They had watched a single human vessel defeat an enemy that had easily destroyed 10,000 of their finest warships. Commander Zelik of the Zelthani floated in their crystalline command chair, their body flickering with colors that had no names, in their language. These were patterns of distress so profound that their species had never needed words for them. "What did we just see?" Zelik asked their science officer. The response came as a harmony of confused chimes. The humans, somehow, turned consciousness itself into a weapon. They were fighting the Vorthons not just in physical space, but in the realm of pure thought. On the bridge of the surviving Krellian destroyer, Captain Vorthak waved his tentacles in patterns that meant deep confusion mixed with fear. His ship had been at the edge of the battle formation, far enough away to escape the initial Vorthon assault. Now he wished he had been destroyed with the others, because understanding what he had seen was worse than death. The human ship didn't just attack the Vorthons, he told his crew. It infected them like a virus made of ideas. The Aquatic Federation's Admiral Bloop gurgled through his water-filled helmet, his bioluminescent patches flashing in distress. Patterns. "In my species' 8 million years of existence, we have never seen organic minds weaponized like this. The humans have turned their own dead into soldiers. They were right, but they only understood part of the truth. The uploaded consciousnesses weren't just weapons. They were the concentrated essence of human military evolution. Every war humanity had ever fought, every lesson learned in blood and sacrifice, every moment when human commanders had chosen duty over survival, all of it preserved and refined into the most dangerous military intelligence the galaxy had ever seen. The Indomitable hung motionless among the drifting Vorthon hulks. Its hull no longer glowed with inner light. The transparent sections had become opaque again. To outside observers, it looked like a simple human cruiser that had somehow survived an impossible battle. But inside the ship, the cost of victory was becoming clear. Captain Jinho sat in his command chair staring at nothing. His eyes no longer glowed with blue light, but they held a haunted quality that hadn't been there before. He had shared his mind with Fleet Admiral Hayes for less than an hour, but that contact had changed something fundamental in his brain. "Status, report," he said, his voice hoarse. Lieutenant Sujin turned from her station. She moved carefully, as if afraid that sudden movements might shatter something fragile inside her skull. "All Vorthon vessels have powered down. No energy signatures detected. They appear to be sleeping." She had been connected to Admiral Chen's consciousness during the battle. The experience of thinking with the mind of a dead hero had left her, with memories that weren't her own, knowledge of battles she had never fought, and the echo of thoughts from someone who had died 50 years ago. "Casualties?" Jinho asked. "No physical injuries," reported the ship's doctor over the communication. system. But the entire crew is showing signs of neural trauma. Mixing living minds with uploaded consciousnesses has effects we're only beginning to understand. In the ship's medical bay, Ensign Minho lay on a diagnostic bed, while scanners examined his brain. He had been connected to General Martinez during the battle, and her tactical genius still whispered at the edges of his thoughts. Sometimes he would start to give orders in her voice, or remember battles from the colony wars as if he had been there himself. The neural pathways are changed, the medical officer explained to Admiral Kwan as they looked at the brain scans. Exposure to uploaded consciousness creates permanent alterations in living neural tissue. The crew will carry traces of these dead minds for the rest of their lives. Kwan nodded grimly. He had known this would happen. It was the price humanity paid for this kind of victory. The uploaded consciousnesses were not just digital copies. They were the actual minds of dead heroes, preserved in quantum storage, but still fundamentally human. When living minds touched them directly, both were changed forever. And the uploaded consciousnesses themselves? Kwan asked. They're tired, sir. The battle took enormous energy. They've retreated into deep storage mode. Some may never wake up again. They gave everything they had to win this fight. The alien fleet commanders requested a meeting aboard the Zelthani flagship. They needed answers, and they were no longer sure they wanted them. The crystalline conference room that had once sparkled with hope and determination now felt cold and forbidding. Admiral Kwan attended via hologram. His image flickered occasionally with shadows that looked like other faces. The uploaded consciousnesses were so deeply integrated with his mind that traces of them appeared even when they weren't active. Admiral, Commander Zelik began, their crystal body flashing nervous patterns. We must know. What exactly did you bring to this battle? Kwan's hologram was perfectly steady when he answered. The accumulated military knowledge of humanity's greatest commanders, preserved after death and given the ability to fight one more time. The alien representatives made sounds of distress in a dozen different languages. The Threx delegates' wings buzzed frantically. You mean the consciousnesses we fought alongside were ghosts? Not ghosts, Kwan corrected. Complete digital copies of living minds, uploaded before death. Fleet Admiral Hayes chose to become part of the Indomitable rather than retire. Admiral Chen was uploaded after she died defending Europa. General Martinez transferred her consciousness when her body was dying from radiation poisoning. The Aquatic Federation representative gurgled in horror. You turned your dead into weapons? We turned our greatest warriors into eternal guardians, Kwan replied. They chose this existence. They wanted to continue serving humanity, even after their bodies failed. Captain Vorthak waved his tentacles in agitation. But the cost to your living crew, we've seen the medical reports. Their minds are permanently damaged. Changed, Kwan corrected again. Not damaged. They carry the knowledge and experience of our greatest military minds. When they have children, some of that knowledge will pass on. Humanity grows stronger with each generation. The aliens exchanged looks of fear and revulsion. They were beginning to understand that humanity's approach to warfare was fundamentally different from their own. Other species built better weapons or developed superior tactics. Humans had learned to weaponize their own evolution. How many more ships like the Indomitable does humanity possess? Asked the representative from the Metal Brotherhood, their robotic voice crackling with static. Kwan's smile was tired and the shadows of other faces flickered behind his eyes. The Indomitable is unique. We built her from the accumulated knowledge of every war we've ever fought, every battle we've ever won or lost, every commander who chose eternal service over peaceful death. The silence that followed was heavy with implications. The aliens were realizing that they had completely misunderstood humanity's place in the galaxy. These weren't the junior partners seeking protection that they had thought. These were beings who had solved problems that ancient civilizations still struggled with. What happens now? Zelik asked. Now the Vorthon threat is contained, Kwan replied. Their collective consciousness has suffered complete breakdown. It will be centuries before they recover enough to threaten anyone again. The galaxy is safe. But the aliens weren't thinking about the Vorthons anymore. They were thinking about the implications of what they had seen. A species that could preserve their greatest minds after death. Warriors who could fight forever, growing stronger with each battle. Consciousness itself turned into a weapon. "And your crew?" asked the Aquatic Federation Admiral. "What happens to them?" "They return to Earth," Quan said. "They'll be studied, help to integrate their new memories and knowledge. Some will train the next generation of neural interface operators. Others will help design the next ship." "Next ship?" The question came from several aliens at once. Quan's hologram flickered, and for a moment the shadows behind his image became clear. Dozens of faces looked out through his eyes, the uploaded consciousnesses of humanity's greatest military minds, all watching the alien representatives with patient interest. "The Indomitable was our first attempt at this technology," Quan explained. "We're already working on improvements. Better neural interfaces that cause less trauma to living minds. More efficient quantum storage for uploaded consciousnesses. Larger ships that can carry more of our preserved warriors." The alien representatives sat in stunned silence. They had thought this battle was the end of the Vorthan threat. Instead, they were learning that it was just the beginning of humanity's true emergence as a galactic power. "You asked why Earth sent only one ship. The UEN Indomitable drifted through the graveyard of the Vorthan fleet like a ghost among the dead. The battle was over, but the ship that had won it was no longer the same vessel that had entered the fight. Its hull bore scars that seemed to shift and move when no one was looking directly at them, as if the metal itself had been traumatized by the consciousness warfare it had hosted. Captain Jinho stood on the bridge, but his posture was different now. He moved like a man carrying invisible weights, his eyes holding depths that hadn't been there before the battle. The neural interface had left its mark on him. Sometimes he would pause mid-sentence and listen to voices that only he could hear, the whispered advice of Fleet Admiral Hayes, still echoing in his modified brain. "Captain," Lieutenant Sujin reported from her station, "Earth Command is requesting a full status report." Sujin's own voice carried new harmonics. The connection with Admiral Chen's consciousness had changed her speech patterns, added inflections that belonged to a hero who had died 50 years ago. When she concentrated, shadows of other memories flickered behind her eyes. Battles she had never fought, decisions she had never made, the weight of command she had never earned but now somehow understood. "Tell them we're coming home," Jinho replied. His words were simple, but they carried the exhaustion of not just his own mind, but the uploaded consciousnesses that had given everything in the fight against the Vorthans. The alien fleet maintained a respectful distance as the Indomitable began its journey back to Earth. The surviving commanders watched through their sensors as the small human ship powered up its faster-than-light drive. They were still trying to understand what they had witnessed. Admiral Thorok of the Krellians had lost his flagship and most of his fleet, but he had survived the battle. His tentacles moved in patterns of deep respect, mixed with unease as he watched the human vessel disappear into hyperspace. "In all my centuries of service," he told his remaining officers, "I have never seen anything like what those humans unleashed. They didn't just defeat the Vorthans, they broke their minds." Commander Zelik's crystalline form flickered with colors that meant profound confusion. They turned consciousness itself into a weapon. How does a species even think to do something like that? The answer, if they had known it, would have disturbed them even more. Humanity hadn't set out to weaponize consciousness. It had started as a desperate attempt to preserve their greatest military minds for future generations. The neural upload technology had been developed to save dying heroes, to capture their knowledge before it was lost forever. But humans had a talent for turning any tool into a weapon when survival was at stake. The journey back to Earth took 3 weeks. During that time, the crew of the Indomitable struggled with the after-effects of their neural integration with the uploaded consciousnesses. Some crew members reported dreams that weren't their own, memories of battles fought decades before they were born. Others found themselves with knowledge they shouldn't possess, tactical insights that belonged to dead generals. Chief Engineer Minho spent hours staring at engine schematics, seeing improvements that came from the mind of General Martinez. The modifications made perfect sense to him now, even though he had never studied the theoretical physics behind them. The uploaded consciousness had left traces of its knowledge in his brain like seeds waiting to grow. Dr. Yoon, the ship's medical officer, documented everything. The neural integration process was still experimental, and every case provided valuable data for future operations. The cost of victory was written in the changed brain patterns of the crew, in the way they sometimes spoke with voices that weren't their own, in the haunted look that never quite left their eyes. The human mind wasn't designed for this kind of contact, Dr. Yoon explained to Admiral Kwan during one of their medical reviews. We're pushing consciousness into territories it was never meant to explore. The crew will carry the effects for the rest of their lives. Kwan nodded. He understood. The price better than anyone. His own brain carried the deepest integration, the most complete merger with the uploaded minds. Sometimes he wasn't sure which thoughts were his own and which belonged to the digital ghosts that shared his skull. But they volunteered, he said, quietly. Every single crew member knew what this mission would cost them. They chose to pay the price. When the Indomitable finally reached Earth, it was greeted not with celebration, but with quiet reverence. The space dock workers who serviced the ship spoke in hushed voices, as if they were working on a shrine rather than a warship. Everyone knew what the vessel had accomplished, and everyone understood what it had cost. The crew was taken to specialized medical facilities where teams of neuroscientists studied their altered brain patterns. Some of the changes were beneficial. Enhanced tactical thinking, improved decision-making under stress, access to military knowledge that would normally take decades to acquire. Other changes were more troubling. Episodes where crew members would respond to situations as if they were someone else. Moments when the uploaded consciousnesses seemed to surface in living minds. Captain Jinho spent 3 months in psychological evaluation. The doctors were fascinated by his neural integration with Fleet Admiral Hayes. Her consciousness had settled into his brain like a second personality, dormant most of the time but ready to emerge when military expertise was needed. How do you feel about carrying another person's mind inside your own? The lead psychiatrist asked during one session. Jinho considered the question carefully. He could feel Hayes's presence at the edge of his thoughts, a warm and familiar weight that never quite went away. She's not another person anymore, he said, finally. She's part of me now. Her knowledge, her experience, her dedication to protecting humanity. It's all become part of who I am. I'm not the same man who took command of the Indomitable, but I'm not less than I was. I'm more. The uploaded consciousnesses themselves were another matter. The battle against the Vorthons had drained them enormously. Some had retreated so deeply into the ship's quantum storage systems that they might never surface again. Others flickered, in and out of awareness, their digital minds damaged by the effort of projecting themselves into physical reality. Fleet Admiral Hayes was the strongest of them, her consciousness the most stable after the battle. She could still communicate through the ship's systems, though her voice carried a weariness that hadn't been there before. We knew this might be our last fight, she told Admiral Kwan during one of their conversations in the ship's quantum core chamber. We were already dead after all. Using our consciousnesses as weapons was always going to have consequences. Was it worth it? Kwan asked. Hayes's image flickered on the holographic display. A middle-aged woman in an admiral's uniform, her face marked by the weight of command and the strange translucency of digital existence. The galaxy is safe, she said simply. The Vorthons are broken, our people survived, yes, it was worth it. But even as she spoke, parts of her consciousness were fragmenting, pieces of her digital mind scattering into the quantum storage matrix, like leaves in the wind. The price of victory was the gradual dissolution of the very minds that had won it. Earth's leadership learned valuable lessons from the Indomitable's mission. The neural integration process was refined, made safer for living minds. The quantum storage systems were improved to better preserve uploaded consciousnesses. New ships were designed, larger vessels that could carry more digital minds without putting as much strain on their living crews. But they also learned something more profound. The galaxy was full of ancient civilizations that had spent millions of years perfecting their technology, their tactics, their understanding of warfare. Yet none of them had thought to preserve their greatest military minds beyond death, to create an unbroken chain of knowledge and experience stretching across centuries. It was a uniquely human solution to an ancient problem. Other species built better weapons. Humans had built eternal warriors. The alien civilizations that had witnessed the battle spread the story across the galaxy. The tale grew in the telling, becoming legend. Some species spoke of the ghost ship that fought with the spirits of the dead. Others whispered about humans who had learned to weaponize their own souls. But the message was always the same. Earth was not the backward newcomer that many had assumed. Humanity had joined the galactic community, not as students seeking protection, but as a species that had already solved problems the older civilizations didn't even know they had. In the depths of space, the broken remnants of the Vorten collective, consciousness huddled in digital darkness, afraid to dream. They had encountered something worse than death in their battle with the humans. They had met minds that refused to accept the limitations of mortality. The warning they spread through. The machine intelligence networks was simple. Avoid the third planet orbiting the yellow star. The organic minds there have learned to weaponize their own ghosts, to turn death itself into a military asset. The galaxy was a safer place now, but it was also a place where consciousness itself could be turned into a weapon, where the greatest heroes never truly died, and where one small ship carrying the souls of humanity's finest warriors was worth more than any conventional fleet.